Hi, welcome to this video. The intent of this video is to kind of record some problems for what I would say are kind of baby steps in Trig. I'm recording this during our remote learning period due to the COVID-19 virus. And so I'm trying to teach students Trig, which is a very complex topic. It's easier learned one-on-one or with, being able to interact. So one of my thoughts was to just kind of talk about the sine ratio today. I also have other videos for how to label a triangle so that you're ready to do the trig. I also will have a video for can you use the cosine trig ratio and can you use the tangent trig ratio. Rather than just throw it all in one video where you're learning sine, cosine, and tangent, which I actually do have a video like that, which would supplement like one-on-one teaching or a classroom setting. Since I can't do that during these times of social distancing, then this is my attempt at it. So anyways, having said that, can you use the sine trig ratio? So we're going to look at a bunch of triangles and determine whether we can use the sine ratio. So here are the 3 steps when you have a triangle problem like this. You want to identify the reference angle. You want to be able to label the triangle with the hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. And again, I have a complete whole video on how to label the triangle, so I'm not going to go into super depth with that. And then 3, determine which trig function to use. In this case, we're just going to say, hey, can we use the sine ratio? Here is one of the mnemonic devices for trig ratios in general with right triangles. So katoa, so means that your sine ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse. The cosine ratio uses adjacent and hypotenuse, and the tangent ratio uses opposite and adjacent. So today what we are looking for is that the sine of a reference angle is going to be the opposite over hypotenuse. And we're just narrowing our focus down in this video to that one trig ratio. So let's get started. Step 1 is we have to look at the triangle. It says to identify the reference angle. The reference angle is not going to be the 90 degrees, so it's not this one, but is the one that either has a labeled with a number or in this case it's labeled with a variable, and that's okay. We're not really worried about where the x's and y's are or if there aren't any x's and y's. We're just determining if we can use sine or not. Step 1's done. Step 2, we need to label the triangle. So what I always start with is my right angle. I go across, boom, that's going to be my hypotenuse. Then I go to my reference angle and go straight across. That will be my opposite. And the one side that's left over is my adjacent. Step 3 is a little more vague. It says determine which trig function to use based on the given information. So what I need to do is look at the information they gave us before I started labeling. They gave us an 8 and they gave us a 15, and this side here had no value. So I'm going to cross out I'm not going to be able to use the adjacent side because I don't know anything about it. So the values that they gave me that I can work with is my opposite and my hypotenuse. So now I'm looking at my definition of sine. Sine requires opposite, hypotenuse, and an angle. We have an angle, we have the opposite, we have the hypotenuse. So yes, we can use the sine trig ratio. Matter of fact, we would have to. That's as far as we're going in these problems that I'm going for, is simply to determine can we use the sine. All right, so in our upper triangle here, again, our first step is to identify the reference angle, and I encourage my students to actually circle it, like make it pop out in your eyes when you look at that picture. So I've identified the reference angle. Next, I want to label my triangle up. So I start with my 90-degree angle, go across. That always is my hypotenuse. I go back to my reference angle, walk across. That will always be my opposite side, and the third side that we label is the adjacent. Okay, again, I've done my first 2 steps. My third step is to look at what information was there before I labeled. And again, as I look through, I had J, that was labeled, so I can use my opposite. I had 8 kilometers, which is my H, but the adjacent side had no label at all. And again, for my sine, the definition is the sine of an angle is the opposite over hypotenuse. So in this upper triangle, I definitely can use the sine. Because I have the opposite, I have the hypotenuse, and I have my reference angle. Let's go down to the bottom one, and again, let's go through the same steps, circling my reference angle, and then I'm going to label. So across from my 90 degree, that's my hypotenuse. Across from my reference angle is the opposite. The third one is the adjacent side. So when I look at, before I labeled, where did I have information here that could have helped me? I had, whoops, sorry about that. I had a 10. Oh my gosh, I am not having the pen selected. That's my problem. There we go. So what they gave us was the 10 and they gave us the P, and those relate to A and H. So when I look at my sine definition, I can't use the adjacent and the hypotenuse. I need the opposite. So I cannot use the sine. All right, so we would have to choose another trig function. It just cannot be sine. These are my final two problems. If you're feeling pretty confident, or at least maybe you want to take some of the steps, hit pause and identify the reference angle and see if you can label those triangles first. And then try to see if you can use sine or not, and then hit play and see if you got them right. So for the top triangle, we have this reference angle. And if we jump into labeling, start at the 90 degree, that's opposite the hypotenuse. The reference angle is opposite the opposite, go figure, and the third side will always be the adjacent. When I take a peek at what was labeled before I already labeled things, I have a 16 and I have a B. And again, what I'm keeping in mind is that the sine of an angle equals O over H. Are those the values that I can work with? Yes, I have an H, I have an O, I have the reference angle. I can use sine for this upper one. On our bottom triangle, let's take a look at that. We have a reference angle of C. We don't know what it is, but that's okay. Opposite the 90 degrees is my hypotenuse. Opposite the reference angle is my opposite. My third side will be my adjacent. And of course, I'm getting to the point where I'm labeling it, and I'm seeing I'm labeling an adjacent. So adjacent is not in our definition of sine, so we cannot use sine on this one. All right, I hope this helped. Again, there will be videos about how to, whether you can use cosine, another video about whether you can use tangent, and there is a video where all three of them are kind of thrown at you at once. So feel free to seek those out, and there's also a video about how to label the triangle. Thank you.